Mike Perry opened as a -260 favorite for this fight, and I get it. The guy is 6-0 and bare knuckle, knocked out Luke Rockhold, knocked out Eddie Alvarez, and he's been in a constant state of violence for the past 5 years, while Nate Diaz has been boxing Jake Paul and doing triathlons. On paper, this looks like a fresh, dangerous fighter against a 41-year-old who bleeds if you look at him too hard. But I think people are getting this completely wrong, and I don't mean slightly wrong. I think the public narrative around this fight has a massive blind spot, and that blind spot is going to cost a lot of people money on May 16th. So let's get into it. Let's start with the thing everyone is agreeing on. Perry is going to come out swinging and Diaz is going to get cut early. That part is probably true. Diaz has more scar tissue above his eyes than any active fighter in combat sports. He's been getting cut since he was 22 years old. He bled against Conor. He bled against Jorge. He's going to bleed against Perry. That's just a fact of life when you've been fighting at the elite level for 20 years. But here's what the casual fan is confusing. They're confusing blood with damage. Those are not the same thing. Nate Diaz has been stopped twice in his entire career. Once by Josh Thompson in 2013 on a head kick that dropped him and led to the stoppage, and once at UFC 244 when the ringside doctor waved off his fight with Masvidal due to a bad cut. Not a single person has put Nate Diaz completely unconscious in over 20 years of fighting. Since then, not a single person has been able to stop him on the feet. Not Conor McGregor, not Jorge Masvidal, not Tony Ferguson. The scar tissue opens up, the crowd goes crazy, the commentators start screaming about a stoppage, and Diaz just keeps walking forward, throwing that left jab like nothing happened. That's not a weakness. That's one of the strangest and most underrated durability profiles in the sport. Now let's talk about what everyone is calling Perry's big advantage, the BKFC run. And look, it's legitimate. 6 fights, 6 wins, knocked out actual combat sports names. His hands are sharper than they were in the UFC. His pressure is relentless, and he's genuinely evolved as a striker. Nobody is taking that away from him. But here's the part nobody is mentioning. Every single one of those bare knuckle fights had 2-minute rounds. 2 minutes, not 5, 2, and that's not a minor detail. That's the entire ball game when it comes to this matchup. Think about what happens in a 2-minute round. You come out, you explode, you throw punches, the bell rings, you sit down, you breathe, you do it again. You never have to survive the 3rd, 4th, 5th minute of a round where the lactic acid is flooding your system and your arms start feeling like concrete. Perry has never once had to deal with that in the past 5 years. Every conditioning adaptation his body has made since 2021 has been built around 2-minute sprints, not 5-minute MMA wars that involve cage wrestling, clinch battles, and ground scrambles. Now go look at Perry's actual MMA record. In 15 UFC fights, he never once went past round 3, not a single time. And in those 3-round fights, he was getting outworked in the later rounds regularly. Tim Means outpaced him, Daniel Rodriguez outstruck him down the stretch. Vicente Luque was landing cleaner as the fight went on. Perry is a devastating 1st and 2nd round fighter. He always has been. He is not built for the back end of a 25-minute fight, and Nate Diaz is literally designed for exactly that. Here's the thing about Diaz's cardio that people keep glossing over because he doesn't look like an athlete. The man is a triathlete. He runs, he swims, he cycles. Not as a hobby, as a lifestyle. He has been doing this since before he was in the UFC. His slow twitch muscle endurance is in a completely different category from almost any fighter in combat sports. And what does that mean in a fight? It means rounds 4 and 5 are not a threat to him. They're where he actually takes over. Go back and watch the Tony Ferguson fight at UFC 279. Diaz was 37 years old. He wasn't clean in the first 2 rounds. Ferguson was landing. Things were getting scrappy and ugly. But from round 3 onwards, Diaz's output started climbing and Ferguson's was collapsing. And by the end of round 4, Diaz locked up the guillotine and it was over. That is the exact blueprint for how he wins this fight. He just has to survive the storm and wait for Perry to start drowning. And here's the thing. Surviving the storm is something Diaz has been doing his entire career against better strikers than Perry has ever fought in MMA. Now let's talk about the most interesting part of this whole fight, and this is where Perry has genuinely made a mistake that I think is going to cost him. Perry has been publicly talking about taking Diaz down. He's been training at MMA Masters, specifically working on his wrestling, wall work, cage escapes. And the reason this is coming up is that John Jones, who is a co-owner of Perry's promotion, apparently gave him advice that the way to beat Diaz is through ground and pound. I understand the logic. On paper, it sounds smart. Take away the boxing, get on top of him, work from guard. But the moment you say the words ground and pound against Nate Diaz from inside his guard, you have to understand exactly what you're walking into. Diaz has 14 career submission wins. 14. He's a second-degree black belt under Cesar Gracie. and in the build-up to this camp specifically, he has been sharpening his grappling with Kron Gracie, the son of Rickson Gracie, one of the most elite submission artists on the planet. His closed guard with his 76-inch reach is a trap. The moment Perry postures up to deliver ground and pound, Diaz's long legs are wrapping around him, looking for a triangle. The moment Perry's head drops into a clinch, Diaz's arms are looking for the neck. And here's Perry's wrestling numbers from his entire UFC career. He landed 4 takedowns in 22 attempts. 4. That's an 18% success rate. Wrestling has never been a weapon for Perry. It's barely even been a tool. He's been in Florida for this camp drilling cage escapes and underhooks for the first time seriously in his career at age 34, specifically for this one fight. And he's being asked to do that against a guy who has spent 20 years becoming one of the most dangerous submission artists in the welterweight division. If Perry shoots a sloppy takedown in round 4 when he's exhausted and his technique is breaking down, and that's exactly the moment he will shoot it, Diaz is going to wrap him up and it's going to be over. Let's also talk about the striking, because I don't want to make it sound like Diaz is going to go out there and box circles around Perry. He's not. Perry's hands are legitimately dangerous, and his pressure is going to cause problems early. But Diaz's output has always been the thing that wears people down in ways the casual fan doesn't fully appreciate. The Stockton slap is not a taunt. People treat it like it's this funny internet moment, but it's actually a biometric disruption tool. Diaz throws it at volume to obstruct vision, frustrate opponents, and make them react emotionally and burn energy throwing wild counter shots. He did it against Masvidal in their boxing rematch last year. Masvidal actually outlanded Diaz 182 to 151 in total punches, landed the harder shots, and still lost a majority decision. Why? Because Diaz threw 740 total punches over 10 rounds, never stopped walking forward, and 2 of the 3 judges rewarded his relentless pressure over Masvidal's cleaner but less frequent output. That's the Diaz formula: volume, pressure, and the other guy breaking before he does. Perry is going to land harder in the early rounds, but Diaz is going to land more, and he's going to keep landing when Perry's output starts dropping in rounds 3, 4, 5. And here's the other thing. Diaz is a southpaw, and Perry has spent the last 5 years fighting right-handed bare-knuckle boxers with no kicks and no grappling threat. The angles are going to feel different. The threat matrix is going to feel different, and Perry hasn't had to solve a southpaw grappling puzzle since 2021. Here's how I see this fight playing out. Round 1, Perry comes out fast and dangerous. This is when he's at his best, and he knows it. He's going to land some hard shots, and Diaz is probably going to start bleeding inside the first 3 minutes. The crowd at the Intuit Dome is going to go absolutely insane, and every commentator in the building is going to say a stoppage is coming. Diaz is going to clinch, tie Perry up, frustrate him, and absorb those early shots the way he absorbed shots from better strikers his whole career. Round 2, more of the same, but Perry starts having to chase. He lands big, but Diaz keeps walking forward. Maybe Perry attempts a takedown and gets tangled up in Diaz's guard for a moment before the scramble resets. Every clinch battle and every scramble is putting money in Diaz's bank and draining Perry's account. Round 3, this is where the fight shifts. Perry's output starts dropping and Diaz's starts climbing. The cardio gap starts becoming visible. Diaz's jab is finding Perry's face more consistently. Perry is breathing harder and his entries are getting sloppier. By round 4, Perry is digging deep into reserves he hasn't needed in 5 years of 2-minute rounds, and what he finds isn't enough. He throws a desperate shot, Diaz clinches, there's a scramble, and Diaz gets the neck. Or Perry shoots his tired takedown and ends up in the closed guard of a man with 14 career submissions waiting for him. My prediction, Nate Diaz, round 4 or 5, either guillotine off a scramble or TKO from ground and pound if Perry can't get up. If Perry wins this fight, it happens in round 1 or 2 with a finish on the feet while Diaz is still bleeding and still absorbing punishment. That window is real. Perry is genuinely dangerous, and I am not dismissing it. But if this fight gets past round 2 and Diaz has survived much worse than anything Perry has ever thrown, then you're asking a bare-knuckle specialist who hasn't fought MMA in 5 years to maintain pace in a 25-minute war against a 41-year-old triathlete who has 14 submission wins and has been training for this specific grappling puzzle for months. The public is betting on the highlight reel. The smart money is slowly moving toward Diaz and the math of this fight. People have this wrong. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Perry's power is enough to end it early? Or does this go deep and Diaz drags him into the dark? Drop your prediction below. Now let's talk about Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano fight. Rousey hasn't fought in 9.5 years. She admitted in her own autobiography she walked into the Holly Holm fight already concussed, with a weight cut that drained the fluid protecting her brain. She was 29 then. She's 39 now. Then Nunes finished her in 48 seconds, while her coach screamed head movement 7 times on camera. She fired him and hired a wrestling specialist, because even her own camp knows the striking defense is still broken. Meanwhile, Carano has been at Syndicate MMA for 6 months, sparring with with Merab Dvalishvili, who publicly picked her to win. She's 5'8" to Rousey's 5'6". Hits harder. And this fight is in a hexagon cage with tighter corners that kills lateral movement. The Holly Holm blueprint, circle away, deny the clinch, doesn't exist here. Carano is going to be forced into exchanges. And every time Rousey tries to close distance against a bigger, harder hitting woman with a documented concussion history, that entry gets more expensive. My prediction, Carano by TKO, round 3 or 4. If Rousey wins, it's a round 1 armbar, and that window is real. But if this fight gets past round 2, a 39-year-old with a decade of brain damage is not outlasting a fresher, larger woman who an active UFC champion just told you is the real deal. People have this wrong. Now the third main card fight, and this one is simple. Francis is a minus 1400 favorite over Linz. Across 11 UFC fights, he absorbed 132 total strikes. 70 of those came from Miocic alone. That's 6 per fight against everyone else. His punching power is officially the hardest ever recorded. 129,161 units on the Power Cube machine. Linz has been knocked out 4 times by Arlovsky, Boser, and Nemkov. None of those men hit like this. His only play is movement, except they're in a hexagon. Tighter corners, 120 degrees instead of 135. Every time Linz tries to circle out, the corner kills his momentum. For half a second, his feet stop. That's all Francis needs. My prediction, Francis. Round 1 KO. The cage took away Linz's only option before the bell even rings. Like and subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this.